See this metallic tube? This is UV sanitation, and I am going to show you how to use UV sanitation in your cold plunge to get your water crystal clean 24/7. Okay, so what is UV sanitation? This whole housing is a product, and this is what is allowing me to use UV sanitation in my system. So that's the system behind me. Actually, currently I'm using the ozone sanitizer, but I'm gonna swap it for this UV pretty soon. But basically the way that it works is simple. The water runs through this hole here, hits the pump, gets output to the chiller, comes back in, and that's where it's gonna hit. This is the UV, and then this actually is a 20 micron filter right here, and some of the water will hit this silver thing. This is the UV sterilizer, and this particular one is the Ambor 16 watt UV sterilizer. And what this does is it uses a certain spectrum of light to kill germs. So for example, we have the full spectrum of light. All the way on one side of the spectrum of light, we have infrared, which you could see in all that red light therapy and those red light devices. Obviously the sun at sunrise and sunsets also emits an infrared spectrum of light. But at the opposite end of the light spectrum, we have ultraviolet light, or UV. And that's what this is. This tub will be sanitized with ultraviolet light. And the way that works is when germs and bacteria from your cold plunge come in contact with the ultraviolet light, it kills them. Fun fact, when people are all scared about the sun and the damage that it causes to your skin, what they are actually most scared about are those UV rays, which are most prevalent in the middle of the day, such as today. So in some ways, you can think of the sun around noon as a giant UV sterilizing light. And that's why many people say sunlight is the best disinfectant, which is, of course, true. So anyway, when the germs and bacteria come through our cold plunge sanitation system, they hit the UV light, the DNA of those pathogens gets instantly destroyed so that they can no longer replicate, and the pathogens effectively die. And to put this in perspective as to how clean and good of a solution this actually is, UV sterilization and UV systems like this are often used actually to sterilize water for your entire house. So most people who are using UV bulbs like this are actually using them to sterilize the water for their own house, water that they actually plan on drinking and showering with, etc. But yeah, I'm not exactly saying you should be drinking your cold plunge water, but people literally use UV sterilization like this for their home drinking water. And quite frankly, if I owned my own home, I would probably install a UV house filter myself. But for now, I'll just be using UV in my cold plunge. Benefits versus ozone. I personally hate chlorine. I think it's terrible and possibly does more damage than good. So I'm always looking for natural ways to sanitize my water. So in my opinion, the best two ways to do that are ozone and UV. The biggest benefit of UV when compared to ozone is that it will be running 24/7, 365. So your water will be constantly getting cleaned and constantly getting sanitized. Unlike ozone, which is only really recommended to run once a day for 30 to 60 minutes. The only negative fact about a UV system like this is that because it's always on, which is a good thing that it's always on because it's always working, but because it's always on, these bulbs are rated for about 370 days. So you will have to replace the bulb about once a year, which is really no different from any light bulb out there, like your house light bulbs. You have to replace them every once in a while anyway. Of course, it's pretty easy to replace it yourself, and the part is only like $15. So figure $15 a year to have clean water. It's a steal in my book. So ultimately that's the maintenance, just once a year, swap it out, replace the bulb. But other than that, it's pretty much set it and forget it. Another huge benefit UV has as opposed to chlorine and ozone is that you aren't actually adding anything to your water. With ozone, for example, you're adding O3 molecules, which is a gas, and chlorine, you're adding those chlorine molecules. But with UV, your water is actually always the same chemically. The UV is just constantly disinfecting the water and keeping those bacteria from growing and spreading. For me personally, I hate chlorine and I do my best to avoid it like the plague. I do personally like ozone, which is what's in the system behind me. However, there are some people that don't. The reason being is that ozone is a gas, and they say that it can in fact affect your lungs. So you do want to avoid breathing it in, and you wouldn't want to put ozone in a cold plunge that's going to be stored inside your house. People also say that ozone can make your skin feel itchy and irritated. Once again, I personally advocate for the use of ozone, and quite frankly, I personally believe that ozone and UV can be used together in tandem for even greater sanitation. So best of both worlds type of a situation. But if ozone isn't for you and you don't want to use gross chemicals like chlorine, UV is undoubtedly a safer and more stable solution. Like I said, I currently have the ozone sanitation set up for my system now, but let's swap it out and add this UV. All right, so we got the UV installed, filling the tub back up. Let's go. All right, everything has been successfully connected. No leaks detected. We got our chiller on, we got the UV light on, so we know it's working. And we are just about ready to hop on in. And all of this, everything that you see here is made so easily by a company called RevX that sells this whole package for like $2,500. Cannot recommend it enough. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing and check out our website at plungereviews.com. We also have the funniest cold plunge memes on the internet at Cold Plunge Memes, and also check out our podcast, The Cold Plunge Podcast.